blessing. Thank you so much. And so I'll go ahead and take a roll call. Julie Seastrom. Jemiah Wassam from Coos.
Present.
Valerie Switzler from Warm Springs. Diane Tiemann from Burns Paiute. Michael Cherry from Grand Round.
Nike Aqua.
Angela Fasana from Grand Round. Alyssa Severson from Coquille. Jennifer Jackson from Klamath.
Vita.
Melissa Montero from Klamath.
Present.
Lloyd Commander from Umatilla. Jamie Crane from Umatilla. Alyssa Lane Keene notified that she would not be able to be here from Siletz. Becky Cantrell from Coquille. Marcia Frost from Coquille. And Jesse Jackson from Cow Creek. And we'll note that Angela Fasana also is here from Grand Round. So it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 tribes present.
Thank you for roll call and for the blessing, Michael. Since we have 4 tribes present, I mean, I still have slides and everything to share. I am also checking. Looks like Dory was able to confirm that everyone's got the link, that the invite went out. So hopefully some more will join us in the
We
next
can still
minute.
go through everything.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't be able to move forward if something, if there was a decision to be made. We'd have to table that to the next one. But information wise, we can still move forward and then send out any information and then put it on the next agenda. So Dana, you are up next.
All righty. Well, let me pull up my PowerPoint. So we'll definitely have some discussion, like you said, Sonia. If there's a decision that needs to be made, we'll just have to wait until the next time, which is totally fine.
If there is something though, because of the legislative concepts or POPs, we can do an email out and ask for a response. Maybe do like a Google response or something where it's official and goes directly into one place so that we can capture that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we may have to do that because it is a little time sensitive. I guess I should clarify. And oh, sorry, I'm not on camera. Hi. We still have time, even though the timeline is that we submit the placeholder language this month. There's other opportunities that we'll have to review and provide some feedback. So this isn't our last situation to talk through it. But I would like to get as much as we can covered in the time that we do have. So for now, though, the first agenda item that I have are just some Otella and Delk updates. So let me share my screen. Can you see my PowerPoint, everyone?
Yep.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, so Okay, hold on. I have to go all the way. We did these things. So scrolling forward, sorry, I thought I started it from the slide that I wanted it to start on. Now here we are. Thanks. So yeah, Paulina and I just got back from being in Southern Oregon for Gov to Gov. So bear with me. Let's get everything back in the right place. So sorry for being a little bit scattered today. I wanted to let everyone know that our DELC emails are okay, we used to have ODE emails when we were with the early learning division, and the ODE emails are going away. So if you do not have the contact information for delc.oregon.gov, like if you've saved our ode.oregon.gov emails, if you're able to remove those, or you can adjust your contact information in your email to change it to the delc.oregon.gov if necessary, because I know sometimes it will just autocorrect to what you've emailed before. So just want to let you all know that because they're going away, or they have gone away. I know it was sometime in June that that's supposed to happen. And so just wanted to make sure we were all aware of that, because we want to make sure we're receiving your emails. And so if you email us at the ODE email address, we won't get it. So it's not ignoring you, but so yeah, there is that. The other thing about Otella grant agreements, I wanted to check on because we did send them last month. I was curious if there's any help that you need from us, any clarifications, and just kind of check in on how the process of having those reviewed and signed were going so far.
I can give an update on our process at CT Clusive. So it should be reviewed and signed for that agreement on the 26th of June. Apologize for the delay on that.
No worries. Thank you for the update. Glad to hear that. And is there anything else that you're noticing, like in the language potentially that we should work on? Just let me know. We can always talk about it one-on-one, but I believe there's like some smaller things that might need to be resolved based on a similar ODE grant agreement, but because we're no longer ODE, we are sorting that out. That is known, but if there's anything else, please let me know. Please reach out.
Will do. Thank you.
Awesome. Alrighty. So then I guess the rest of what we're working on is going over the language, just to bring back what we're working on and what the timeline is. We did a lot of work in April sorting out the language, and so in May we kind of clarified some of that language for this tribal early learning plan and fund bill, and that's what we'll also be doing today. So we'll submit the placeholder language next week, I believe, and following from that, in the fall, we're going to receive draft language back. So that will be in October. We'll share it with the Tribal Advisory Committee once we receive it. So, oh, sorry, go ahead. Or maybe someone, oh, okay, on mute, not on mute. No worries. So in the fall, when we receive the language back, we'll share it with the Tribal Advisory Committee, and that's going to be an opportunity to review and make changes. It can also happen during the session and in spring 2025 if needed. So all that said, I would also like to add, there's possibilities in these timelines that we've been sharing changing. So if that happens, we'll of course let you know. There's also the possibility that the language that we've worked really hard to put together is changed when the drafters draft it. And even if that happens, we will still, as Delk, work as hard as possible with the staff to make sure that the changes that we had asked for are incorporated to what we get in the fall. So wanted to make sure that we're transparent in some of the pieces of this process that we're not like 100% in control of. There's are things that are outside of our control, but that we will try to work with and make sure that the things that TAC wants to be in the language are happening, or if the timeline changes, that we're making everyone else aware, but just it's not necessarily something that we're able to own, but we'll share those processes. And I think that was the majority of what I know about it, but I'll invite Kate or Alyssa potentially to add to that if there's anything that you feel was relevant.
No, I think you said that perfectly, Dana. I think that what you're describing is something that can come up a lot when an agency submits language to Legislative Council, which is the arm of the legislative branch that actually drafts statutes for agencies. Sometimes they have their own drafting conventions and ways of doing things. So sometimes, even when we've worked really hard on a draft together and it looks perfect to us, Legislative Council will sometimes make changes that they think are necessary. And so what you see come back as late as October 25, but hopefully sooner, might look a bit different. They might just be non-substantive changes, and some of them might be substantive, but like Dana said, we can work hard with the drafter and if necessary with the legislature to ensure that the will of the TAC is represented by the language that is introduced in the session. I hope that is helpful.
Yes, it is. For me, at least. You said it much more eloquently than I did. So thank you for adding to that. Are there any questions about that before we move forward? All right, well, because we have several topics to cover, I just want to make sure we're being respectful of both time and the opinions that everyone has. So as we work on this, we'll do discussion, and then since I don't think we're at quorum, we'll have to send emails about this, but we can still talk about it. So that's kind of what we'll move forward with. We have 10 slides to discuss. And so I hope we can have some good discussion that we'd be able to incorporate in what we're going to have to email out afterwards. Unless anyone else hops on, then we can pivot and we'll go back to doing like if the language works, then we can just do thumbs up or verbally say like, yes, that works, just like we did last month. So we've got parts about the plan strategy to discuss. Just wanted to clarify on a few things and the Delk set aside, but you'll probably notice there's a new item that's added to this list, which is Otella membership. And so just going through and reviewing with DOJ, this is something that we've been directed that we should be including as the number of members for Otella, and to also specify when quorum is met. And so because ODE, we obviously looked into their language for the American Indian Alaskan Native Student Success Plan. They like vaguely mentioned their advisory group. And so I did bring that up when talking to DOJ about that. And so it is not completely necessary to have the number of members in statute, but it's recommended because it's the easiest way for us to understand what quorum is, which is something that we're always going to need to keep track of. And so there's a couple of ways we could go about it. Like if TAC is comfortable with, or well, yes, you're TAC now, but if this group is comfortable with Otella maintaining a similar structure to TAC, we could try to keep it that way, where quorum is 5 out of 9 tribes being represented, and where we have 2 representatives from each of the tribes, so that there's 18 tribal members. So we could just keep it that way, or we could talk about doing something different. And so I think, okay, this is the language that has been just basically copied out of the TAC structure that we can pull into the bill language. So since we're not at quorum now, for those who are present, does 5 out of 9 tribes still feel like that's what TAC would want Otella to continue with?
Well, I think that it's going to depend on what the committee looks like, as in, I don't know if we want to hold it to just tribes, if we are having community partners and potential care providers in. So I think that we have to establish the membership of who it is before we decide on quorum. That's just my thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so then, and that is another slide that we're going to get into. So while we're on the topic, would we, it sounds like we've already established we want community members to be a part of Otella, and similar to ODE's advisory group, is it correct that we would want the community members to have a voting capacity on Otella?
Sorry, Dana, did you ask a question or just looking at the slide?
Yeah, no, I'm wondering from you or anyone else, is the intention for community members to vote or to just be members?
I was trying to think of what it was in the original when we very first started. Do we have that language? Do you know, Alyssa, when we very first convened under the original law, if those were voting members? Because I do recall there were a few positions on there that were non-voting, but I don't recall what the original language to that was.
Yes. Yeah, so I pulled up the original bill before it was amended. And the only non-voting members are the Early Learning Council representative and the DELC representative. So the tribal representatives, Legislative Commission on Indian Services, and the parents were all considered voting in the original legislation. I can.
Because I feel like all of the voices, and I know for the American Indian Alaskan state plan, I'm the tribal rep on that, but the community voice sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, is just so helpful in giving different perspectives, and childcare providers and tribal or tribal owned childcare perspectives can be extremely important, especially in accessing funding and opportunities, or even the PD. So I could see, their voice should, be able to, they should be able to vote, is my thought. Anyone else?
Just, I have a concern with that. If the TELA is making decisions, do you want community members to have the same voice as a sovereign nation or tribal representatives? And I get their input could be valuable, but do you want them to be on the same level as a sovereign entity?
Well, with this one is, if I understand it correctly, they would be advisory votes that would then go to the tribe's representatives in education. Is that correct, Alyssa?
Well, originally they would have they actually would have had the same voting power as the tribal representative. So if the vision is that they're advisory, so you want their input, you want their feedback and information. But for example, if the majority of tribes approved something and those who kind of were dissenting were the community members, that would be fine, right? So if you want them to really just be providing input and providing advice, guidance, then they would be non-voting advisory representatives, the way, DELC might be a non-voting member. As the original legislation was crafted, they had equal footing with the tribal representatives.
And I see, and I completely get, and I think it's just something that is really confusing to, like, say, the government to government, is because some of us, our tribes give us that decision-making authority, and some tribes don't. They have to take everything back to their tribe, so they really wouldn't have voting power at that time. So that is kind of confusing, that we're trying to work out, or DELC is trying to work out with tribes on how those votes would count.
Well, and one thing we could think about operationally, and Chris, feel free to jump in, when we think about the Early Learning Council, which has to take votes on administrative rules in particular, we usually have a meeting where we brief the council on the policy, on the changes, have space for questions, and then a subsequent meeting is where the decision is made. So in that structure, if that's kind of the operating structure we use, Sonia, then that would allow any tribes who can't speak on behalf of their tribe without going back to tribal council or other representatives, that would give time to do that, so that on the day of a vote, they've been able to go through their structures. So operationally, we could plan to run OTELA like that, but wouldn't need to be that explicit in the statute itself.
Right, we can give notice depending on how much notice you think you would need. So sometimes it's a month between a presentation and notice and the vote, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 with multiple presentations on the topic if it's a really complicated one, or we know that it's going to take a long time for members to work through to come to enough knowledge to feel like they can make an informed vote on the issue.
Then maybe that would work.
So just to recap then, can you describe, someone describe, I don't know who I'm asking this question of, describe what it would look like and how we would word that?
I'm trying to translate very quickly the 2055 language, Dana,
Okay.
with what I'm hearing from Sonia and Jennifer, so I can share screen in like 2 minutes.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I also want to, I'm gonna skip ahead in this a little bit because I wanted to show the group what is in ODE's advisory committee charter. It's not in rule or statute, but this is what they have for representation. So they only have 9 members from tribes, so 1 representative for each tribe. So that would already be a deviation from how TAC is structured and what we've talked about for Otella so far. And then their community members, they have 9 community members. So it's equal, it's even 9 and 9. And then for their community members, it's based on different regions and different types of representation. And so that is something to consider too, is how many members we'd want to have, because we already have 2, what we've been talking about, which we could still change it, but is 2 from each tribe, so we're at 18. So if we have 9 community members, then we have 27 people, and if we're trying to make decisions and pass things, then that could be a little bit difficult, not only to get everyone, or at least the majority, at the table, but also to get agreement. And so that is another thought. But at the same time, the benefit is we have more diverse perspectives. So you'll be hearing from more people in different parts of the state and doing different work that would be beneficial. So it really depends on what this group thinks is best and what to do. But I just wanted to make sure to share this, since we've kind of started going down this road of that discussion. And I might have also let enough time go by for Alyssa to be ready to share screen.
Just did it. Yes, that's perfect timing.
Okay. All right, perfect. I'm gonna stop sharing then. Go for it.
Right. So this is not going to be perfect by any means. So what I did is I took the House Bill 2055 language. I've highlighted, don't know if it's 25, and this intro is imperfect. So this would be 2 representatives from each tribe, and then we've got, if I wasn't sure if we still want LCIS, but have that as a non-voting member, modifying the 4 parents to being 2 who shall be a non-voting member, and then having 2 providers. I believe from previous conversations, we did not want an early learning council representative, and then having DELC. But so that's my very quick, rough interpretation from the conversation, if that looks right to folks. So what this means is that the only voting members are the tribal representatives. And then the providers and parents and DELC would be non-voting. And Chris and Kate, if you see any errors with the thinking, please jump in.
I think this works. I think I know Dana has the current version of what the legislative is. So what we can take this and then put that into that structure. And right now it has a clause for non-voting members only for the staff agency folks. And so what we'll do is we can just move that clause to then be representative more in the list of services. So we'll kind of merge the 2 together.
Great. Is this, Sonia, does this kind of meet what you're thinking when we think about lifting up those voices? And Jennifer, your point of not necessarily putting them on equal footing with sovereign nations?
Bit better.
Okay.
I can't hear you, Sonia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to read it. I was trying to make it bigger on my screen so I
yeah.
could see it. Do we need? Would we need a member from the commission? Why would we need a member from the commission, I guess?
I don't think we do unless you all want that connection.
I don't think we've ever, I mean, Karen Quigley used to come and advise us on legislative concepts sometimes and lobbying opportunities, but never regularly attended any of the tribal meetings, so I don't know why we would need that position.
Yeah, I think they technically are on the TAC and don't regularly attend, so you could always invite them to particular meetings if you wanted them to join, but you know, this doesn't preclude you, particularly because they wouldn't have voting capacity. So if you wanted them to come on in an advisory capacity or to present, the Otella would be able to do that, no problem. Is two the right number? Kind of getting to Dana's question of how large you want the group. Is two parents and two providers the right number? And I also, for the providers, named either a tribally operated or a program serving tribal children, but I don't know if that is what you all were envisioning, if you do want either perspective or if you only want programs that are operated by a tribe.
Would we have like an application process? We would distribute this within our communities and then have an application process for like parents to apply, like maybe give it to Head Start policy councils or to.
Yep. Yes, I think we would really look to each of the tribes on the recruiting of all of the positions. And I put in the top that we would appoint in consultation with the tribes, and I don't know Katie and Chris or Katie and Chris as we work with DOJ, making sure we could do that ideally together.
That's it. That's in there.
Okay, great. So then I think we would work with you all and possibly with the education subcommittee on what that application looks like. What are the questions they're asking for? You know, what are the types of perspectives we want to recruit for the provider and family roles? And then we likely would have like a selection committee or something to help us determine who actually moves forward to be appointed on Otella.
I am fine with this. I think trying to get 4 parents is a lot. But and I'm fine with them being non-voting. I just sometimes think of what is the investment if they're non-voting and continuing to come. And so maybe that's best to keep them non-voting, because then we wouldn't have to, it wouldn't like prohibit us from doing business if we didn't have a quorum.
I wonder if we could think about some language that, and again, this doesn't have to be in statute. Part of this could be in what we put in the application, but if there's just some language that kind of acknowledges the advisory capacity, that just to help underscore like that there is an importance to the role still. So we could see if maybe there's some language around advisory capacity or to elevate the perspective. We could maybe look at some other, I'm thinking of like the statewide interagency coordinating council at ODE, for example. There might be some language we could pull from other statutes where there are parent representatives, just to kind of amplify that. The other thing we could think about, you know, for I think probably both the parent and provider roles, it's unlikely that we'll see the representatives every time. And so the advantage of maybe doing 4 is you have 4, but maybe 1 or 2 show up each time. So that's something else that you could think about. And we also could think of framing this as a minimum. And so if we're finding that the parent representatives are having a lot of difficulty attending, you know, we can look at our operating structures and is there a better way to convene the meetings, but we also could potentially then increase the number of parent representatives so that there's a better chance of having that perspective there. I think that's something we could do, is frame this as at least. Kate and Chris, if that sounds right to you.
Yes. We can work on it. I'm just pulling the language of ORS 343.499 now. So look at it, the State Interagency Coordinating Council.
Thanks, Chris.
And I'm also not speaking for anybody else, but I was thinking that just having 2 parents or 2 providers seems a little bit limiting, because if we're only getting like from a metro area, for instance, that wouldn't be very representative. But if we put it as a minimum of 2, I like that, because we'll potentially be able to get more diversity in terms of the representation. So just appreciate that as a thought.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts from any of the other tribal reps?
This is Angie. I'm just trying to process and think through it all, but yeah, I think I like this. I mean, it is the best I think we can come up with. I understood both Sonia's point as well as the putting everybody on a level playing field. I've been in both situations, so trying to avoid that, but I think that this language accomplishes that, so I could live with this.
And Angie, do you have any opinion on, a minimum versus a maximum of 2 for each type of parent and provider?
I like the minimum. I think it does leave, I mean, just writing statutes, you want to give yourself some movability. So adding those words in there gives us some wiggle room, and that's always good.
And also, I would just add that what we have right now in the draft language is, it says that the department may also appoint X number of members. And so what Alyssa has pulled up is from the old Tribal Hub language. And so it says what Otella shall consist of. And so I guess I just want to clarify, do we want, obviously it shall consist of the tribal members that are recommended by their tribes and appointed by DELC. So those are the 18 that we know it shall. But then for the parent representatives and early learning or childcare representatives, are those optional at the tribal membership of Otella's behest, or are those are they shall? And I think that they're just may, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting that.
I think I'm hearing a desire that there are families and providers experiencing these services on the Otella, that's an expectation. The flexibility is, because they're non-voting, if the 2 parent representatives don't show up, it doesn't mean we can't take a vote or move the work forward. But that if we think about future state, this is where figuring out what you want in statute, what I'm at least hearing is, when I'm gone, when leadership has changed, we want DELC to have to make sure that there are parents and providers on Otella. If that becomes a may, then future DELC could choose not to appoint anyone.
Wasn't that, if I'm remembering when the POP was being developed last time, wasn't that like a request specifically from, is like that parent voice?
Mhm.
If I'm remembering right, that they wanted that parent voice
was
in there.
It was part of the original legislation, and there had been some feedback that the agent that Delk ELD at the time had received about wanting to make sure that those receiving services had a voice in the work. But because the TAC was focused on the design of the tribal hub, not the implementation, there was agreement that it didn't make sense for that voice to be at the design phase. So I do think, thinking about the implementation of it, that does more closely align having those affected by these decisions at the table.
Do you think there would be any pushback in reducing the numbers, or as long as that we have? Do you
I don't think, I know, I mean, we're really overhauling this section of statute. So the way it's crossed out here just to show the difference between the original tax scope and the new proposal, but it's not necessarily how it would show up in a bill. So I don't think we have to worry about it looking like we're reducing or removing. It really will just be presented as this is what Otella will be. So I don't think you have to worry about that, about any pushback there. I think the legislators who'd mentioned this before will probably just appreciate that there is a space for families and providers to be involved.
Is that number 25 at the top, that would change, right? Would it be?
Yep.
20?
That
And
was the TAC, the original TAC number, so we can put whatever we want here.
And in all reality, this can change, right? This is what we're presenting. I mean, legislators, it can get changed as it's moving through or at all stages, but we're just saying this is what we want.
Yep, this is the current thinking. If we decide in October, as we've had more months, that we need to adjust it, we can adjust it. We can also amend once the bill has dropped. And in 4 years, if we decide this isn't working, we can always amend the statute in the future too.
And if you don't want to put an exact number, there is some leniency to say up to 25 members or up to a certain number. So you're not stuck at having to have an exact number for membership.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if one of the tribes doesn't have two representatives?
Yep, that's what I was thinking. It would be nice for the up to, because we have had some tribes that have consistently had one person attending.
We can work that into the language too.
And also, I'm thinking that if we still say that if TAC still wants it to be that way, that quorum is 5 of 9 tribes, then it wouldn't matter as long as it's from 5 of the tribes, whether or not tribes have 1 or 2 representatives. I mean, that I think is what is the key of being able to meet quorum. And so we would also need to figure out how, like, that it also needs to be specified there can be up to 18 tribal members, and then the other up to X amount of non-tribal members, so that we're not ending up with more non-tribal representation, even though they're non-voting, but that is called out. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure that sentence makes sense.
Yeah, which, so Dana, if you're thinking On the lean end of things, say you only have one representative from each tribe, that would be 9. So we want ideally to make sure that the non-voting, so if we have 2 parents, 2 providers, we're at 4, 1 DELC employee, we're at 5. So even in that case, you would still have more tribal representatives than non-voting representatives. Is that what you're thinking?
Basically, yeah. And my thought process was, if I can articulate things today, that we wouldn't, just because tribal spots aren't filled, we wouldn't say that they now can be filled with non-tribal. They could be filled with childcare providers or more parents, that they have their own spots, and it's these 4, 5, 6, whatever they may be. And they can't like backfill into the tribal positions.
Correct. They're not interchangeable. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. For the Early
That's-
Learning Council, if we have a congressional district seat that's open, we can't say, well, we tried for a year, we're just going to fill it with a different congressional delegation representation. So yeah, it would not be able to be used to increase different representative beyond the tribes. I will send that very rough language to Kate and Chris as we continue to incorporate that. But I think it's a really good point, Dana, to remember really from an operational perspective, the important part is particularly the voting ability and the quorum and how we define quorum. Typically, quorum is a straight numbers game. So if you have 18 representatives, you'd need 10 members for a quorum. So it'll be important to say that for these purposes, a quorum is about the number of tribes represented, not the number of tribal representatives who are present.
Yep.
Yes, so like 5 of the 9 tribes.
Yep. Yep.
And I think you want to just make sure that the language is clear that it's the 5 of the representatives designated by the tribes, right? Because you may have a parent that's a grand non-tribal member. You can't replace them for whoever the tribe has designated to sit on the, and
Yep.
we run into that sometimes.
Yep. Important
Pull
nuance.
that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just making sure that when you're drafting that quorum language, that it's 5 of the 9 representatives designated by the tribes constitute the quorum.
All right, so just to recap, it's going to be quorum is going to remain 5 of 9 tribes, being those who have been designated by the tribe, and that the community members are required, but they're non-voting. Are those aspects all correct? Thumbs up, or you can come off mute and correct me.
Didn't we talk about this the last meeting where it was shall and may in the one part?
Yes, we did.
Am I
And
losing it here?
we had a different language choice then. And so that's why I'm trying to make sure I understand, because what we gathered last time is that Otella shall be the tribes, the tribal representatives, and it may consist of community members. And so
But if you're making those providers and parents have to be part of it, what happens if we don't get them? Can we still conduct because they're non-voting members, we can still conduct business, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks
I
for
just-
adding that to the chat, Alyssa.
Yeah, I hope I got that right. The simplified version.
Yes. I saw a thumbs up from Sonia. Thank you for confirming.
Yeah, the process sounds pretty sound to me. I agree with this plan.
Thanks, Jemiah. And I saw Angie thumbs up. So Klamath, either Melissa or Jennifer, do you have more thoughts on it? And then also Becky. Thumbs up from Melissa. Thank you.
I think it sounds great. It just might be confusing if we're like requiring to have the parent reps without it being like with it being non-voting. That might be kind of like, I don't know, confusing of like, why are you requiring them to be there if, because we want their input? Like, it's important to have them there, but that just might be some confusing language as far as like required.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We can look at how to demonstrate the importance. Right now, the Tribal Advisory Committee does have LCIS as a ex officio non-voting member. So it's a good example of these meetings proceed even when LCIS isn't present. But they still have a seat if they wanted it.
Thanks for adding that reminder, Alyssa. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Becky, because it does seem kind of contradictory. Like you need to be there, but you can't vote. So making sure that what we can write in the bill language is clear, that we want parents there, we want caregivers there and providers, because it's important. And so we want your perspective, but ultimately, like, this is a group that's serving the tribes and tribal children. So the tribes are like the utmost, and just keeping that there is kind of what's centering the work. So thank you, everyone. Are there other thoughts or anything else to add before we start looking at some other language?
I think we could go on to the next.
Awesome. Well, let me get my PowerPoint back. Thanks for being here, Kate and Jemiah. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So we got through our quorum, and now on to plan strategies. This is so much more simple to discuss because I just wanted to make sure that I understood the intention from the April meeting. And what I heard is that tribal language and tribal history, shared history were really important as objectives from the plan. So even though it wasn't the language that was stated in the meeting, when I went back and listened to the recording, that's kind of the understanding that I got. And so to clarify, what is on the screen in yellow, that the plan would include elevating cultural and experiential early learning curriculum, including Native American languages and tribal history, shared history. Is that correct?
Do you have it written, Dana?
Yeah. What are you referencing?
I'm not sharing I must not be sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. Well, that in yellow is what I'm referring to. And I'm so sorry that I wasn't sharing my screen a minute ago because I thought I was.
I was trying to absorb it and so thank you for sharing.
Uh, And I just remember from when we met last month, the conversations that we had was like, we want to make sure we're repeating the things that are really important. And so culture preservation came up. And so this kind of seems along a similar thought process, that these are important aspects that we want to make sure to call out. And so that's what I interpreted.
This is Angie Pisana, and yes, I would support this addition.
Thank you.
I do as well.
Awesome. Are there, let's see. Melissa, Becky, Jennifer, Michael. Oh, we lost quorum though, because Jemiah hopped off.
You better add in that to your things if, what happens if you lose quorum in the middle of the meeting? If we can continue business, if we met a quorum to start. No,
No, I think, I don't know if we still have Chris, but no, a quorum is usually required for a formal action. Chris, isn't that correct? Yeah.
But we gained Becky though. We were at 5 with Jemiah, but then Becky joined from Coquille. So does that Siletz? I think we still have quorum. Grand Round, Siletz, Klamath, Coquille, and was there?
No, Jemiah was
Oh, the 5th.
Jemiah was the 4th one to join, and then Becky joined, and that was 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, you
we
could at
would-
least ours and then reach out to the other one, the other tribes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can still keep engaging in this discussion. I think for just how quorum works, we wouldn't have to put that in the statute in itself. And sorry, I couldn't tell if you were talking about currently right now or what we would want to put in the legislative language.
well, I mean, our meetings are the same way, our general council meetings, if we don't have a certain number of, if we don't have 50 voting members there, then we can't conduct business. So I'm just wondering when you get into situations like this, if that's allowable. But if it's not, then it's not a big deal to me because I'm used to meetings like that.
You can still continue discussion and deliberation, just we wouldn't be able to have any formal recommendations or decision members by the members because quorum isn't met at that time within the meeting.
Is this an item that could go on the next agenda, or would it be an item that would show the tribes that supported in this meeting and then send it out for weigh in from other tribes, or could this be moved to the next one?
Well, we can move it to the next one. That's a good question, Sonia. So there, like I said at the beginning, is that this is our last meeting that we have before we have to submit the placeholder language. However, it's not our last opportunity. So we can still continue to have these discussions. We would just be submitting the language that we've been able to get through so far. And in the fall or whatever the timeline ends up being, if it changes. But right now, October is when we're supposed to receive the draft language back. So we can bring forth new changes or additions or adjustments then after we've had more time to deliberate once we have quorum again.
Yeah, and if this is not your formal adoption of the language and this is still discussion, what you could do now is still continue the discussion in the notes, make note of what each tribe has agreed to, and then send it out via email, and then have agreement at the next meeting, or if any of the other tribes that weren't present at the time of the conversation, or even if there was additional conversation and discussion to be had, you can then have it at that discussion, but doesn't need to end now.
Thank you for adding that, Chris. So I've heard good things from 2 tribes so far, in for this language. So because I see a thumbs up from Melissa. Thank you.
I'm good with it. Support this language.
Thank you. And then Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, it's no. The short answer is no.
All right. Well, we only have a couple more slides, a couple more areas to look at. And so this one is culturally specific. And the reason that we're bringing it up is because so we did talk about this in April at the TAC in-person work session, and it was included, but also there's a definition for culturally specific that exists. And so I wanted to just bring forth the language and make sure that that was the intention, or if it doesn't work, then look at different options, which is basically just removing it. And so we just don't, what we're trying to do is make sure we're not limiting. So in the light of not limiting, this is the definition for a culturally specific early learning program that that is a program designed to serve a particular cultural community and is primarily staffed and led by members of that community, and designed or adapted, or designed by or adapted by members of the cultural community that it serves. And so to kind of finish the thought process of being limiting, I mean, this sounds like it would work for most programs, but then what if a tribe wanted to adopt something like, I don't know, I'm just going to pull out Relief Nursery as a random example. And Relief Nursery has like a set guideline, and if a tribe wanted to do it, but then they can't really change the guidelines to match the definition of culturally specific, then that could be kind of conflict. So alternatively to culturally specific, it could just say, and going back to the last slide real quick, it could just say increase access to early learning programs for tribal children, and just take out the culturally specific.
Can't you just put which may include culturally specific? So you're not limiting it, but you're still keeping that in there.
Yeah, we could do that. So maybe then based on what you're proposing, it could be increase access to early learning programs for tribal children, including but not limited to culturally specific early learning programs. I think that solves the problem.
Yes, I like that. It's good.
I do too.
Awesome. And then just checking, Becky and Melissa, you had thoughts to add?
I think that language works fine.
It's good. And I see a thumbs up from Melissa. Awesome. Well, that's great, because this is the last slide that we had. And it's my favorite slide because it has numbers on it. And yeah, so we had talked about a set aside for DELC, and we just put 5% on it, which is fine. But I also just wanted to circle back to it and give some examples of like what 5% would look like. And so we don't know how much money it's going to be. I just put some random numbers here, and the first number is 626,000 because that's what Otella is receiving for the biennium. And so the 5% that Delk would keep would be and when I say the percent that Delk would keep, Delk is keeping it in order to provide services as requested by Otella, like we had discussed before. So we'd have about $30,000 to provide maybe contract out for professional development or for some kind of technical assistance program or whatever it is that Otella identifies. And, dreaming big, let's say we get $20 million for all of the tribal early learning plan, and then Delk would retain $1 million. And so that's what 5% looks like, with a couple different numbers, a couple different scenarios. And so I just wanted to check and see, and after seeing it represented in number form, I want to see how the TAC's feeling about that, and if 5% is still feeling like the proper amount that Delk should retain.
Would that be 5% of the base budget, or would that be 5% of any additional funding that is allocated to Delk?
This would just be 5% of the tribal early learning fund.
Okay.
So in theory, if we received, let's say that the legislature at the beginning of the biennium said we get 626,000, but then later in the biennium, for whatever reason, they decide to give us another $1 million, then Delk would start with the 31,000 in this example, and then we'd also get another 50,000 if more funds were allocated, because it's staying at 5%. Obviously, the purpose of the Tribal Early Learning Fund is for most of the funds to go to the tribes. And so if 5% feels like it's too much, we could say it's 2% or 1% or 3%, or we could say it's more.
Where does your guys' funding come from currently for Dana and Paulina and in your guys' jobs? And because my question is, we only get 600,000, but then you're taking 5% off of that. You know what I'm saying? So where does the funding come from currently for those positions? Or did you guys already take that off?
No, so when we received the position authority for the 3 tribal affairs office positions, that comes with the funding. So the funding for their positions would not come out of this. So for example, we are in the process of contracting with the Northwest Native Chamber to provide technical assistance to help tribes access the the child care infrastructure fund that Business Oregon is going to administer. So an example would be we could contract with Northwest Native Chamber to provide technical assistance if there was a particular tribe that wanted to acquire another facility for childcare, needed help with zoning requirements or something like that. We could, if there was, I know we've talked before about the professional development offered by regional CCR&Rs and hubs isn't culturally specific. And so this would give us resourcing to bring in somebody with experience in creating tribal preschool programs to provide some of that coaching and technical assistance that a tribe has requested. So that's what the dollars would be used, is not to fund our travel, not to fund Dana, Paulina, or Dory's salary. It would be for us to contract with anyone else to give the tribes support you all are needing. Whether that's applying for grants, whether that's TA for your classrooms, or any other initiatives within the tribal early learning plan that a tribe would like some assistance on. So if it were $1 million, $50,000 isn't going to buy a lot of TA. You know, we may be able to, depending on what the scope and scale is. So that's really the balance here, is we don't want to take an outsized portion of the dollars, and we want to make sure we have enough money to support you all in the ways you're requesting.
I think that professional development piece from cultural lens and bringing someone in to work with tribes was very important. And one of the reasons that the request for a hub was originally sought was that professional development piece, because most of the tribes weren't getting it from their local hubs. And 31,000 in a 2-year biennium for professional development, bringing someone in, is
Yeah,
a huge amount. So I'm
we
good
paid
with,
10,000 for like 3 days.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
that's-
I'm good with the 5%.
I'm
Yeah,
good as
and-
well. I think it was a very important piece for some of the tribes to have that access to that. So I agree with what Sonia said and would support the 5%.
And I would also just add, like, yes, this is a portion that Delk can do some contracting. However, it's already part of what's in the tribal early learning plan that the tribes would be doing anyway, that the funding that tribes receive can go to professional development. Obviously, there's economies of scale when we're doing something for all 9 tribes versus tribes doing something for their individual tribe. So if, yeah, 5% definitely doesn't go as far with 626,000 as it would with 20 million, but it sounds like there's some positive thoughts on just sticking with the 5%.
Do you guys feel that that's enough to provide this, what you guys are trying to provide?
Think so. It'll depend on the request itself and whether it's one tribe that wants it or multiple. So there could be circumstances where there are more requests than we have resources, and we probably would provide some TA or work with a tribe if we couldn't fulfill that request, to see if we could get them that support another way. But I think this generally would be sufficient. Something we also could think about on the other end of the spectrum is, you know, would you want a cap? Is it 5% not to exceed $1 million or $2 million? We always, again, in 2 years, 5 years, can come back and add a cap, but that's something else. If there's a point where, you know, in the future, if the tribal early learning fund is $50 million, you know, do you not want us to get more than $1 million, right? So that's something else to think about. That maybe is better answered after we see how this actually rolls out and what's needed, but I just wanted to put that on the table.
Thanks for adding that, Alyssa. It's good to know that there's potentially a third sort of route of looking at it. And so I've seen thumbs up earlier and positive affirmations from, I think, Sonia and Angie Fasana. Becky, thumbs up. Melissa, thumbs up. And Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Great. Well, after this, I'll take the last gosh, 2 or 3, yeah, 2 slides worth of commentary and make sure that those are shared out for the other tribes to weigh in on, since we lost quorum there when Jemiah left. And in the next couple of days, I will work closely with Chris and Kate to make sure we've done the best that we can in capturing everything into our into the bill language, and we'll be submitting that on behalf of TAC next week. And then I guess we'll probably need quorum to just sign off on the draft language before we do that. So that's, be on the lookout for an email from us for that piece. And I'll set it up so when the emails go out, and I'm not sure if they're going to come from myself or come from Dory, but whoever it is, we'll set it up so that it has like the function to vote or have a form that you'd be able to fill out, like a Google form. I think Sonia had mentioned that. So we'll have that all set up so that it's easy and accessible for you all. And I just want to thank you again for being here today and taking the time out to work on this. We still have some more work to do, but I think we've done a lot. Well, you've done a lot. And there's a lot of really good ideas that have, and good advocacy that has been coming to this discussion to make this work. So thank you. And is there, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I also just wanted to thank you. I know that it can be really difficult to work through statutory language as a group, but you've all been so helpful. As staff, we're really trying as much as we can to model all of the actual changes that you want word for word, and hope that you feel that the final language that we can get to you represents what you've talked about as a group today. But again, once we submit the draft language this month, it'll come back in the fall. So there'll be another opportunity to look at it again and make any adjustments then after Legislative Council takes a look at it. Sorry for jumping in, but thank you, Dana.
Good, thank you for adding that. Paulina or Alyssa, did you have anything that either of you wanted to add?
I just want to thank everybody for being here and providing input, because that's very important. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's really exciting, and I'm very impressed at how well this has gone, because it is hard to go through statutory language. And Dana, just kudos to you for the format and the approach. I think the slides have been really helpful, and taking it piece by piece for us to anchor to has made a really complicated process easier. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Alyssa.
Are you guys closing? Are you guys closing me? Sorry, I have to go answer. I had a quick question, and I don't know, it's not about the hub, but I'm hoping with Alyssa and other people from Doctor, you can answer it. the $500 grant that just came out for certain providers, but you have to be licensed by the state. Is there any reason why the tribes that aren't licensed by the state weren't included in that?
I think you're referring to the ones being offered by Portland State, and
Yeah,
that is because the dollars did not come to us. They went directly to Portland State, so we actually weren't involved in determining the criteria. We can check in about that, but those are a direct allocation that was defined by advocacy partners. But we can check in on whether they have some flexibility and make sure they're aware of the oversight.
yeah, because the qualifications were ERDC, or if you receive ERDC funds, well, it doesn't make sense when you have CCDF tribes operating throughout Oregon to exclude them. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, okay.
Yep, we'll contact them, Jennifer, and make sure they know that they've created a gap in their criteria, and see if they're able to address it. But that's the challenge when dollars go directly to entities and not through us, is then we can't inform the eligibility criteria.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too. I think it's things like that, tribal programs that aren't licensed, that I see a lot of room for improvement just across the board in terms of making sure there's still access. So anyway, if anyone else has anything to say, now is the time, and then we can go ahead and close. All right. Well, hearing nothing, I think we're good. Thanks
Thank
again
you, everyone, for coming.